Well, here I am, up in the mountains. And as you can see, there's a lot of fog. Lots of fog, actually. See, fog down the road there. Fog, fog, fog. I guess it just goes to show, sometimes the answers aren't always clear, It's just the way it is. Sometimes you're traversing through foggy terrain. You have to feel yourself through the process. It's just the way it works.
Train the muscles, not the joints.
Welcome back to Natural Gallant Bodybuilding Mountain. And today I'm going to do a few sets of bench presses while I'm talking to you guys about some concepts. And the first concept I'm going to talk about is, how do you know if you're doing too much? And let's just talk about range of motion. So for instance, in one of my videos, a few videos ago, I did some deep squats. Now I've talked at length about that there are certain ranges of motion that will irritate your joints, and you could try to rehabilitate your way into that range of motion, but sometimes there's a point of impossibility, let's just put it that way, of using weight under certain ranges of motion will just do nothing but irritate certain areas. And you have to either work up to it really slowly or, also embrace the impossibility of doing certain ranges of motion with certain joints or certain types of exercises. So this is of course based on individuality. And a lot of times the problem is with a lot of people who watch YouTube and so forth is that they will see somebody out there selling a course or talking about how you can increase your range of motion in a certain joint and somehow have bulletproof knees, back, or whatever. But the truth is that in some cases that is not applicable. It just isn't, But the thing is, you got to understand that selling a dream is much more profitable than selling a reality. And that's something that a lot of people have not come to terms with yet. But once you start to realize that reality will be showing you something, and it doesn't matter what the charismatic sort of video or snake oil salesman is saying to you, sometimes what they're saying might not be possible for you. Now that doesn't mean that you are, going to have a exercise in futility, right? When it comes down to increasing flexibility or strength or muscle mass and so forth. But if you don't embrace your own individuality in the process, you may start to follow false ideals, right? So this is a very spiritual thing, right? This is not, this is only for advanced people, honestly. Anybody that can't understand what I'm saying, I don't blame you, and maybe you don't want to embrace what I'm saying because, like I said, everybody wants to be a superhero. Everybody wants to be able to do everything. Somebody says you can't fly, you're going to prove them otherwise by jumping off a building. Like, I understand. But what I'm saying is that you can become great, but you have to be great in your own way. And for instance, like with me with squats, right? Like I built big legs on stage through doing my squat that felt right to my body. Because after years of trying different techniques, different ways, different things, I noticed that certain ranges of motion, no matter how much I stretched, no matter how much rehabilitation I did, I just got knee irritation. It did not help me put more strength on or more muscle or even feel better in the physical body. So because of this, I developed, or at least followed, the intuition of my body and moved in a way that felt natural. And this is called natural bodybuilding, but not just because it's about drug-free bodybuilding, but also because it's about accepting your nature and working with it instead of in direct opposition to it. Speaking of natural, I thought I'd drive up here in the woods, go for a drive and talk to you guys about a way to apply natural to your exercises. Now, you've seen me do this all along and get trolled constantly for it, but what I'm going to say is sometimes the most natural way of moving will be the most effective. So you're not fighting the awkwardness of a movement. And I've talked about exercise creativity in the past, where people get super creative in order to isolate certain muscle groups. But this can work against you. But this can work against you if you start to move the body in ways that start to cause problems. So a surefire sign is that you start to get joint inflammation, or certain tweaks, or certain sort of pulls, muscle pulls, and so forth. And we see this with a lot of bodybuilders who flare their elbows on the bench in order to really isolate those pecs, but they go heavy and at the same time try to get creative with the movement. And because of how unnatural it is, it starts to cause issues, right? So if I was going to push somebody, say somebody was in front of me and I would push, my arms would come from here and I would push straight like that. So the delts would be involved in the movement. I wouldn't put myself in a flared elbow position to push kind of weird over the top, right? So there are certain movements that you do when you're lifting heavy weight, which are naturally in alignment with what's natural, right? You're going to try to take the path of least resistance, or the path that causes the least negative stress on the body, right? Just like if you jump, you're not going to go into a full squat in order to jump to slam dunk a basketball. You're going to go from a partial rep squat, right? A partial stance, to jump, and that's where you're going to get the most amount of power. So by accessing these natural ways the body can move, you'll be able to move more weight, but safer than just doing awkward movements. Now, of course, I've talked about the fact that doing an awkward movement here and there with light weight can have some very strong benefits. But if you're noticing that when you're lifting weight and you're getting some sort of injury, ask yourself, are you lifting in a natural sort of way, or are you trying to fit a sort of template which is not necessarily matching the natural way that your body moves? So that's really what I want to say about that. And you can see this sort of thing in bench press, right? People, when they tuck the elbows more and then they bench, they start to get stronger in the bench and they have less pec injuries, less shoulder injuries, and so forth. And this can apply to many different movements, right? A lot of times with shoulder presses, for instance, when people go super heavy on behind the neck press, they tend to get shoulder issues, right? But if they do behind the neck presses with medium or lighter weight, and they're conscious of the range of motion, then it's not quite so awkward, and then maybe their shoulder doesn't get irritated. So this is something for you to pay attention to as you train, and not necessarily discard because you're trying to fit the template of whatever person is doing what on the internet. So yeah, I just wanted to interject that. Now back to the workout. Mountain. I'm not here to say that you can't overcome certain limitations, but there are going to be certain limitations that you can't overcome. And instead of getting emotionally wrapped up in that, learn to listen and find out what is working for you. So for instance, me with deep squats, if I'm using pretty lightweight, but deep squats like ass to the grass or whatever, I do notice that the next day or two, I do get knee issues where there's inflammation of the knee, even though during the time of doing it, it doesn't hurt. Well, that is a sure sign that that is not the right thing for me to do in some way. Maybe not the right thing to do with any sort of weight, or maybe I need to back off on some of the range of motion, or maybe I need to make a few adjustments in the stance and so forth. But only through embracing the fact that doing it one way is not positive and I should investigate other ways, can I begin to evolve. And that's really what this path is about. So embrace your nature. That is real natural bodybuilding. Embracing your nature, working with it and making it stronger, but you're working with it instead of against it. And that's really my best advice to you, right? So yeah, let's do a set of warm-up here. I don't know if I'm gonna go heavy today. I probably won't. I didn't eat a lot of protein yesterday. I did talk on the podcast recently about higher protein intake, but yesterday, it was a weird day. The power went out in our neighborhood for like 12 hours and all this stuff. So basically eating became a real big problem. So anyway, my protein intake was probably only around 150 grams, 160 grams yesterday. And I've been trying to shoot for 250 or 260, maybe 270 in a day. So yeah, I just took the day off working out, and then yeah, now I'm back to normal. So we'll see what I can do today. I've already had 100 grams of protein And I'm going to try to get an extra 150 for sure in for the rest of the day and see. So I'm experimenting with a bit of higher protein intake because that's the other thing I'm investigating right now, because there have been certain things that I've seen, certain pieces of information that I'm testing. Just because, some people say that when you're older, you need more protein, not less, and I embrace that possibility 100%. So yeah, here we go. So yeah, if some range of motion or something you're doing is causing joint inflammation the next few days after you do the exercise, even if it feels pretty good the day of, there's a very distinct possibility that you need to change something. And I've noticed this with certain exercises, right? So say if I touch my chest with heavy weight with bench, I'll notice that my left shoulder gets a little bit weird over the next few days. So you're paying attention in the micro, which is in the moment, and then you're also paying attention in the macro, which is the few days afterwards, and see how your body responds and what's going on, like what symptoms are happening. And if you're getting joint pain, then there's something that you might want to adjust. It's that simple. It's like ongoing experiment, right? So I just put 225 on the bar. Easy weight, easy weight. But I'll talk to you about another concept in a second here. So let me do a couple reps of this shit. If I was going to say something that has got too much emphasis on it, like something that I think has too much emphasis on it, I would say it's the perfect repetition, right? People, they get too focused on the exact way a rep should be performed instead of, obviously, being safe, not injuring yourself, but at the same time, just concentrating on how do we exhaust the muscle or muscles, right? Depending on what you're doing the exercise for. But there's these super specialists out there that think they've got it down, like everything's a hack, right? They think they can just hack the process. Like somehow if they do the exercise with just a 1 degree rotation to the left or the right, somehow it will revolutionize the amount of results they're getting. And I found these people that were so cerebral, they usually had the least amount of results when I was in the gym back in the day, like when I was competing. I'd watch the people that would just justify and rationalize everything. But the people that made the most amount of results or got the most progress, those were the people that just knew to put out balls out effort. Just put the effort in, exhaust the muscle as best you can. But whether you're using 1 inch range of motion in one direction or another, didn't matter. It didn't revolutionize, what was happening. And sometimes what they naturally were doing was exactly the right thing because it felt natural to them. Again, going in alignment with their own nature. So you will see this vast diversity of what feels natural for one person to the next. And then many people are saying, do what I did because that's what felt natural to me. But that doesn't mean it's going to feel natural to you. So I know I say this over and over again, but it's just the deepening of this understanding. Once you have a really in-depth understanding of this, you can stop destroying yourself and doing the self-abuse approach to natural bodybuilding. And the self-abuse approach is the doing what is hurting me instead of what's working, right? If you're doing what's hurting you instead of what's working because somebody said it, then one could say it's an abuse path, not a natural bodybuilding path. And if you abuse yourself long enough, it's just going to cause problems, right? So what's the point? Let's do another set with 225. My reps are perfect, okay? These reps are perfect, even though you don't have to worry about them being perfect, but my reps are perfect. So this will seem like a contradiction. My favorite natural bodybuilding show of all time wasn't a show that I won. It was a show that I took second place in, although John Hansen in his book, he said that I took third. And actually that's true, except for somebody that took first place got disqualified for whatever reason. I don't know whether they failed the drug test or what happened, but the bottom line is I end up getting silver in my category in the Natural Olympia in the amateur division. Now, there's a lot of things about the show I didn't like. Okay, so this Natural Olympia show was one of the shittiest run shows I've ever been to. It was run in a downstairs area in a bar in Greece, okay? And so, I mean, there's probably strip bars with a better setup for a stage. This was just a small stage that you'd see an average like three-piece band playing on, you know, in a pub or something like that. And at the same time, the amateur show wasn't less than the pro show, as much as some pros that might lead you to believe that they did something special to become pro. Well, really, just to enter the pro division, all you had to do was pay more money, and then you entered the pro division. And then what would happen is the promoter would take half of the collective money. So say there's 4 guys that spent $100. The promoter would take the $200 and keep it for himself. And then the competitors would get $200, you know, prize money. Say the winner would get the $200 prize money, or it would get split up amongst the first or the top 3 competitors or whatever. So it was a total scam. It wasn't like there was sponsors that were going to give out some real money or whatever. So it was just a bullshit thing. So you saw a lot of amateurs that said, screw going pro. All I got to do is spend more money, and you don't really get much in return. So what's the point, right? There was no real money in the pro division. So that's why guys, most of them competed as amateur. But yeah, the Natural Olympia was a freaking disaster. I mean, the hotel, guys are getting bites on their stomach and stuff from bed bugs and shit. Like all that stuff was going on. But the most fun part about it was that I went over with the Canadian team. So this one guy, Jeff Kipple, who was organizing some of the Canadian shows at the time for this federation, he put together about 20 people or so. There's about 20 Canadians, and we all went over there to compete in the bodybuilding as well as the fitness and stuff. So there was a lot of girls and guys and some fitness stars there. Trish Stratus was there, and she was a big-time magazine model at the time. Tito Raymond ended up coming, although he wasn't on the Canadian team. He's an American, but he came separately. And so there was a lot of, it was like a big party in a way, right? I mean, we were all eating chicken breasts and that sort of thing, but there was so much camaraderie as we were traveling and seeing some of the sites. Like we'd take a bus and we go out and see, you know, some of the sites around. We went to Athens and so forth, and went to some beachside towns and saw like some of the life around Greece at that time. And yeah, there was such a camaraderie around the competition, but it wasn't the competition itself that was fun. The competition itself was a disaster, right? But just hanging out with people that all were in the same sort of mindset and on vacation, it became incredibly fun, right? So there was lots of little dramas that went on, like let's just say there were some girls in some guys' rooms that they shouldn't have been, and vice versa. But overall, it was good, clean fun. Like I met a lot of good people from Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, like all over Canada. And those of you who aren't from Canada, you know, don't realize how big it is. Like for me to take a plane ride to Ontario, it's like 4.5 hours, 4 hours, you know, from BC. So it's like, you know, California to New York almost, you know. So meeting people from all different walks of life and having a good time. We had, it was great, you know. I mean, I wish, the reason why I didn't show up in top shape for that show was that I was in top shape about 2 weeks before, but then I got food poisoning, and then that threw it all off, right? And of course, you always got these backstage weird people that sometimes, that's the one thing I didn't like about natural bodybuilding sometimes too, like, or bodybuilding in general. Not all shows, but a lot of shows, you ended up with these creepy sort of guys backstage that were, you just got a weird vibe from them, and they were, I don't know, creeping on a lot of the guy bodybuilders and stuff. I didn't really like that kind of whole scene, you know. But they always were also armchair experts, where they'd always have something to say about your physique, regardless of whether they knew what the fuck they were talking about or not, right? So I'd have guys like, oh yeah, you would have done really well if you're just a little bit more cut, you would have won and all this. And I'm like, yeah, but you know, it wasn't a diet thing. It was like a food poisoning thing. Like you get sick and you drop 12 pounds of body weight just in water alone in 2 days. You know, watch how your body rebounds after going through that, right? So that was why I got second place at the Natural Olympia. It was a food poisoning issue. It wasn't a physique issue. But you know, not a big deal. My life wouldn't have changed if I got first or second. It doesn't matter, right? It's, you know, in the end, you know, sometimes your ego's so wrapped up at the time of winning or not, but then you realize like 20 or 30 years later that it wouldn't have made a damn difference in your life anyway. At least not in natural bodybuilding. Maybe if you're in the normal bodybuilding, maybe it'd make a difference because you get all that prize money and whatever. But yeah, that was the most fun competition of my life. Even though I didn't win, it was a great time, just traveling on the road and getting to know people. You get to know specific things about people as you room with them. Poor Ian Walling in Ontario, though, he got to know me really well because I was fighting food poisoning, remember? And because food, again, this was another problem, food wasn't readily available to us as we were told. We were told that chicken breast and rice and all this stuff was going to be available. Of course, you go downstairs, it was like full legs of chicken and, you know, reasonable by normal people's diets, but not necessarily for competition diets, right? So you'd struggle to find something to eat. And anyway, as a backup plan, I had like several boxes of power bars, which are not a great pre-contest diet anyway, but they were high in potassium. They had some protein and it was enough to tide me over so I wasn't, you know, let's say depleting my system, say I couldn't have access to food. So I brought those, so I was eating those by the truckload because there were times where I just couldn't get access to food. And of course, inevitably, my digestive system was acting up. So I got a few nicknames along the way from Ian Walling. Because the poor bastard had the, you know, roommate with me or whatever, but the room never smelled the same after a box or two of those power bars. So, but otherwise, man, it was a great time. But yeah, that's really it. That was my fun time in natural bodybuilding. That was the best competition I ever went to. But it wasn't a competition. It was actually the travel itself that was really fun. So yeah, anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you in the next video.
Mountain.